Right, welcome back from that short break. And Eze Onyekpere is set to help us out on some of the issue around harmonization of this tax bill. Very good day to you, sir.
My pleasure being here.
All right, sir, let me take from you. What was your reaction when you heard that both the Senate and the House are going for harmonization committee to take a look at this tax bill now?
Well, nothing special in terms of the way I feel, but it's simply in the details of what is about to be harmonized in terms of the provisions. That's where my interest lies.
Very interesting. And when you talk about this aspect of that interest of harmonization, one of the aspects that the Senate particularly have passed is that, which a lot of people have also asked that, do we still need more bureaucracy in this kind of environment that we are? That are going to be appointing 6, directors from the 6 geopolitical zone into the FRS as we speak right now. So what's your take on that?
Well, let me start by saying that once you start making an agency to be run by persons from geopolitical zones, it takes it away from a rather technocratic agency to a political agency, because it's now based on representation on the geopolitical zones. I think that may not have been very necessary, because it increases the bureaucracy, and of course, as the bureaucracy increases, the cost of running the agency also increases. I don't see so much value added in it, although they will say it gives people a sense of belonging, the federal character principle, but I don't see much value added from that proposition.
Now, talking about the cost that will be bringing on the agencies, now they have reduced the 4% collection service cost to 2% in this particular new law that is coming. So what's your take on that one? Because a lot of people say, okay, that is quite fair, but 2 from 4. What's your take on that?
It's the funding of the revenue collection agency should not be a question of percentages. It should be based on need. What exactly do they need to do their work to motivate them so that they can be properly remunerated to collect the tax? 2% is on the high side. If you recall that the proposition is that we are going to have just one centralized agency that will be collecting all the taxes that all the agencies were doing in the past. So if that is the case, there is the idea of introducing technology, plugging the leaks so that more than twice what we have today will be collected. So imagine a situation where you say it is 2%. Okay, that is 2 out of every 100. All right, if that is the implication, imagine you plug the leaks and you collect 50 trillion. That means the agency will be going home with 1 trillion. What exactly are they going to be doing with that kind of money? If you look at today, FIRS has magnificent buildings scattered all over the place as a means of how they can invest, account for all the big money they are collecting. So I don't think they even need up to 1%. It should be based on need and some sweeteners. They should bring their budget and let that budget be approved based on need, motivate them very well, because if what we are hoping for materializes and you start collecting 100 trillion in a year, so the agency will take 2 trillion, it doesn't make sense to me. It should be based on need rather than on a percentage, because they are just doing their work. What's so special about it? Why you have to give them a certain percentage? So every other agency doing some other work, legislative, judicial, or the executive work, can say, oh, we are very important, therefore we're entitled to a percentage. It makes no sense.
Exactly. And when you do mention about need, it brought my attention to the issue of the essence of this tax reform bill that we're talking about. It's all about to bring about fiscal, integrity, fiscal transparency and accountability in our collection of our taxes. But in your own view, will this law really help us and take us to that promised land of having a fiscal integrity in our tax collection?
Well, laws do not improve transparency, accountability, value for money, or provide sustainable development on their own. Laws make these beautiful changes only if those who are in charge of implementing it or running the law or policy are properly guided and are committed in terms of achieving those responsibilities and change. just like we had a beautiful electoral act the last time, it didn't stop INEC from bungling the electoral exercise. Neither did it stop the judiciary from interpreting the law without common sense and as if to say they live on the moon. So if the operatives, if there's a political will from the highest level to appoint right caliber of persons and those persons are transparent enough, they can always realize plugging the leaks. But if it is business as usual, there's no hope.
Now, talking about appointing the right person, this law is also envisaging a mandate secretary to be appointed. And one of the criteria of appointment of mandate secretary is that it could be a legal practitioner or a professional financial expert. In your own view, why I'm asking this question is that there was a particular agencies at the point in time there was a controversy whether we should be appointing a legal professional into that particular agency. One of the anti-corruption agencies, but here we are, a financial agency is coming up, and we are still having that issue coming up. What's your take on this particular appointment criteria of a mandate secretary?
Whether you appoint a financial expert or legal practitioner goes to no issue. Yes, you must have the competence to run the secretariat of a board or an agency in accordance with best practices and the Companies and Allied Matters Decree Act. So what is important for me is how competent is that legal practitioner? How ethical in terms of how honest and dedicated to his duties? How is he observing the ethics of the profession and the requirements in accordance with the law? So it is neither here nor there. Good to have a professional be the secretary, but what manner of professional? Who is he? Is he going to be appointed based on his track record, or because he's a member of the ruling party, or he supported the ruling party, or he's a brother or relative of somebody in the corridors of power? So these things are just there. The important thing is about the implementation. Like I said the last time, bring in the best law. Copy down what they have in America and Britain that is functioning well, which we have done most of the times. If you bring it into this environment with people who never believed in the reforms in the first place, we are not going anywhere. It's about the individual. It's about the human being who runs the system and motivates every other factor of production around him.
Exactly. Now, talking about the human beings who runs this system of Nigeria, now there is a very controversial aspect of the law, although it has been put to rest by both the House of Reps and the Senate right now, because we now have the sharing formula for the VAT. 10% is going to the federal government as against the initial 25% or 20% they were having before. 55% is going to the state, then 35% is going to LG. What's your take on this sharing formula? Because in the past, everybody has argued that federal government need to collect less. But as we have argued today, it is not just the law, but even when this 10%, 55%, 35% comes, how they manage it matter. So what's your take on it, sir?
Yeah, I support the fact that the federal government has reduced their take. I think it was 15 now to 10.
Yes, yes.
If you ask me, I would have even further reduced it to between 5 and 7.5 so that the states and local governments can have more resources. So I'm fully in support of the reduction so that there will be more money at the state and local government level.
Now, very interesting aspect. Now, I love your perspective in that regard. But let's also look at another very controversial, change in numeric, in name, or I will put it. Now, they are no more using the word derivative. What they are now using that will be used in this new law is place of consumption. If you could recall, this derivative stock caused a lot of row when this particular law was going to public hearing and the rest of them. But are you also okay with the place of consumption when it comes to this VAT issue that became issue during the public hearing?
There was no issue in the first place because as the law was drafted, the chairman of the committee made it clear that the word derivation was used so as to liberalize access by consumers, states and local governments where this thing was being consumed. Now, before they gave, for instance, that if Coca-Cola was headquartered in Lagos, all the VAT accruing from people who drink Coca-Cola, whether in Sokoto or in Akwa Ibom, accrued to Lagos. And that's why you see people making noise. Oh, Lagos IGR, Lagos this, Lagos that. Okay, and some states, they will tell you states in the southeast did not contribute anything to that, which is extremely ridiculous. So it is place you consume the particular item or the service that matters. So to the extent that it's now better understood, if instead of derivation it's called consumption, to the extent that what matters is that all the goods and services consumed in state X, in Imo State or in Sokoto State, will be calculated and the proper percentage given to that state, instead of leaving it for the headquarters, which was the practice before. So I'm in support of that.
Very interesting. I really agree with you on that regard, talking about this pace of consumption instead of derivative. Although a lot of people see that derivative word too technical for ordinary Nigerians to understand. But let's also look at another key aspect of the essence of this bill, because one of the things that President Tinubu is targeting is a 1 trillion economy. In your own understanding, with this particular tax, airports or galvanize us.
Can we even analyze the sharing formula before you go to the 1 trillion economy?
Exactly, I'm coming to that, sir. But I just want us to look at this particular, because it's becoming so obvious that the key issue is that for the president, his target is the 1 trillion economy, and he has seen his policy reform coming from the tax aspect as a way of galvanizing towards that. But in your own understanding, do you see us going to that level?
The first question you ask yourself, where are we today? So we moved down from almost $500 billion economy during the last Jonathan administration to less than 200 today, if I'm right. We moved from being number 1 in Africa to number 4. So it's not about a mantra, you want to go to 1 trillion. Where is the evidence that you are headed towards 1 trillion? We discussed the removal of fuel subsidy, flotation of the naira. Say, okay, it's impossible. We need to save money. We need to do X, Y, Z. Since we have removed the fuel subsidy, floated the naira to release more money to the states, local government, and the federal government, what results have we seen? Has the economy improved or contracted? Even if they were to collect more tax, I don't see it as pushing the economy to the 1 trillion stage. It is also about those managing the economy. Where do they invest the money that is coming in? We are told fuel subsidy removal will give us more money for education, health, investment in infrastructure, roads, power. Are we seeing that? So it's not about how much the federal government and states are collecting. Tinubu has this Lagos impression he had. He's the ultimate taskmaster in terms of collecting new money. Ballooning the money available to either be managed or mismanaged. But there is no sign of where those monies are being invested. I just gave you the instance of the fuel subsidy. Where are the new roads being cut? Where are the new power stations being built or new investment in the distribution or wheeling of the power? So for me, simply increasing taxation or improving the efficiency of collecting it, great idea, but that is not simply the way. That's just a subway. There are many other things that need to be done before you get to the 1 trillion economy. And this is just like one out of 100 or 200 of the things that need to be done.
Exactly. Now let's now look at the aspect of that sharing formula you earlier raised. But for the House of Reps, for the Senate, there are two versions of their bills and saying two different things in terms of the sharing formula for VAT. For instance, let's take a look at the House of Reps. For the House of Reps, they're looking at the VAT formula that will bring about 50% in equality, 20% in population, and 30% in consumption. That is for House of Reps. Then for the Senate, on the other hand, they're looking at a situation whereby they can have the VAT sharing formula or distribution of the fund in a way that will cover 50% for equality, 20% for population, as well as 30% for consumption. But in this regard, will this scale through, or will there be another way of ensuring that this is balanced from your own understanding of this sharing formula?
It's the same thing between the Senate and House. You talked about 50, 30, 20.
Yes.
50 on equality, 30% on consumption or derivation, and 20% on population.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
I think this is a product of a certain section of the country throwing their weight around, trying to hold others to ransom, if you ask me. Equality, great. If you remember, VAT is more or less like a sales tax. And the sales tax is a local tax. You remember after some years ago, states like Lagos and Rivers started all these special taxes on hotels and consumption. I think which the Supreme Court eventually threw out because they were protesting that the VAT was being collected and shared almost like nobody owned it. Now, 50% on equality. What is the definition of this equality? As a consumption tax, as a sales tax, it should have been 50% based on derivation or based on consumption. Now, after equality, you came back to population. What does population mean? A population that is not effective in making a demand. You share 50% because all states are equal.
Exactly.
Then you come back and say, give you 20% because you have more population. And then refuse to give more on the basis of where it is consumed. If that your population is a real population, why is it not consuming? It should have been based on equality and consumption. Because if you have a good population, it will make effective demand. So your consumption as a very popular state will increase. You can't, that's a challenge we are talking. This is also related to Nigeria's population policy. Some people believe it is their duty to increase and multiply and populate the earth, and refusing to train that population, refusing to expose them. So it's a population that is more or less dependent on other sections of the country, contributing little or nothing. Okay? Because a huge population that is educated, a huge population that is mobilized, a huge population that is employed should consume more to give you more on the consumption, should also pay more tax, bigger than where you have lower population. So the idea of setting aside something based on population is ridiculous. It's simply people throwing their weight around and being, with utmost respect, it sounds a little bit irresponsible.
I will also agree with you to that extent, because I could remember during the public hearing of this particular sharing formula of the fund coming from the VAT, a lot of people raised questions about the population issue and the rest of them. But as it stands right now, it seems that the chamber, the green chambers and the red chamber are on the same side. But going forward,
it is based on the Nigerian North-South divide. That's what is happening. I mean, we should call a spade a spade. I don't run away from. I don't want to sound politically correct. You have a population that is adding no value. What is the value of your population if it can't make an effective demand? If I am 1 million in my state and you are 2 million in your state, and there is no cultural or religious something that is stopping us from drinking Coke, and the 1 million population is bringing in more VAT on Coca-Cola than you are 2 million, and you want more money to collect more than they who are drinking it, who are suffering, maybe who feel the brunt of it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, it is simply people failing to understand or just throwing their weight around because they feel under the present dispensation they can hold everybody to ransom. It cannot be defended through any empirical formula or through anything that is sensible.
Exactly. Now, having said that, we can just take a cue by doing things properly. I think that's what I will take as a submission from what you have just said. Doing things properly is the way to go. Now, talking about doing things properly from what you have just said. Now, the key issue that for me, and in talking about this tax reform, is that there is an idea behind it. And the idea is to have a measure that will ensure that our fiscal consolidation can be built on through transparency and accountability. Even though you argued earlier that if these laws are there and there is no superhuman to help us to apply them, to implement them, we may be having issues. But the question that many Nigerians will also want to ask is this. The government want to raise money apart from the non-oil sector. And they're asking this question, will this stop us from borrowing from external sources?
Nigeria has sets of challenges in the fiscal sphere. Yes, the first one maybe we are collecting less taxes than we should.
Exactly.
But that's one part. The second part, which is the bigger challenge, if you ask me, is that the little collected is being frittered away. And there is no evidence of value for money. Go to the 2025 Federal Appropriation Act and see service-wide votes. We're complaining the health sector is so poorly funded. You go there, you see service-wide votes, which is not under the Ministry of Health, about 200 billion in renewed hope agenda medical services. That tells you it's a slush fund that will be mismanaged and they are reporting to nobody except between the Minister of Finance and the Presidency. You see another 20 billion for catastrophic health expenditure, whatever that jargon means. While we are here to activate the Vulnerable Group Fund of the National Health Insurance Authority Act. So you see all kinds of monies. You see monies, billions for SDGs. And these have been the practices of those days. Those money running into trillions are not accounted for. They are usually mismanaged. So it is not about how much you get. So if you get more money like the Tinubu administration is doing, and you unilaterally say you are going to cut Calabar, Lagos Coastal Road, without passing through due process in procurement, award any figure you want, pay out money without due process. So you get more money and have opportunity for more money to be mismanaged or stolen. So as far as I'm concerned, it is beyond simply raising more money. It is about value for money, more transparency, more accountability, and also, for instance, if you are raising more money, that means you should cut down on borrowing. The Tinubu administration is raising more money. Go to the website of the Debt Management Office. Have we cut down on borrowing? No, we're increasing borrowing. More than we've ever borrowed in the history of this nation. So for me, that's why I say it is just one step. It's about the human beings who run the system, what their true intentions are, because their true intentions may be different from what they state on paper.
Yeah, very interesting and very deep perspective, particularly on the aspect of the borrowing as I asked the question, because one of the things that many Nigerians will be thinking is that, okay, with this tax policy that is coming, at least you reduce the burden of borrowing here and there, but here we are, even as you have said, it may not even go that way because of the human beings that are managing our system. Then going forward and providing solutions to some of these issues that we have raised, particularly as the National Assembly conference committee meet, what would be your advice to them? Because we can't say there are no gray areas in this particular tax reform they are about to meet and harmonize. So what's your advice to them?
Well, we've raised most of them in the discussion. The issue about consumption or derivation and population should be properly harmonized. And of course, like I did say, reduce the money going to the agency that will be collecting all these taxes. Let it be based on need rather than a percentage. Because if the system succeeds, they will have more money than they need. And of course, I'm happy that they didn't increase VAT. They still left it at 7.5%.
Exactly.
I'm also happy they said they will introduce technology. So let them reflect all these things in the period that will go to the president for approval. So that's my take.
Exactly. Now, to the president, in the next 2-3 weeks or 1 month, this bill may be before him for him to sign. But as rightly pointed out, from the appointment of executive directors from 6 geopolitical zone to mandate secretary, he has to properly appoint the right set of people, because for us,
not politicians. Not politicians.
Okay, go ahead, sir. Just take the question for us.
He has to appoint the right persons who have a track record. Track record in their fields of expertise. Okay, and having the right expertise to be there, and who are not saddled with moral problems, like those who were running the NPC before, who will lie to us that the refineries are working when the refineries were not working. So it shouldn't be a political process. It should be more about ethics, expertise, and capacity to do the work.
Exactly. Now, finally, before I let you go, for Nigerians who are so hopeful about this tax bill, because a lot of people are seeing hope arising in this particular tax bill. But what's your take and what do you have to tell them?
Like I did say, until I see the people who will run the system, I will decide whether there is hope or there is no hope. Everyone we see them, we give them some time to check their performance, because you can't simply sit on the road or just look at somebody and determine what he will do. Until you watch him perform, then you can now assess and evaluate whether the performance is good or bad.
All right. So thank you so much, sir, for being on the show today. And from your very deep knowledge and understanding of fiscal policy, and that's why you have to bring you on the issue to help us unravel some of the issues, and gladly you did that for us today. Thank you so much, Mr. Eze Onyekpere.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So very soon we still have to call on you. 2025 budget is still there with its own challenges. Very soon we have to call on you to come and help us say 1 or 2 things about it.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day, sir.